Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the small village of Mvezo in the Eastern Cape Province of South Africa. His birth name, Rolihlahla, meant troublemaker in the Xhosa language, a fitting moniker for a man who would later shake the foundations of an oppressive regime. Mandela's father, Gadla Henry Mafakaniswa, was a chief and counselor to the Thembu king, but he lost his position due to a dispute with colonial authorities. This early exposure to injustice planted the seeds of Mandela's lifelong fight against inequality. After his father's death when Nelson was just 9, he was sent to live with Chief Jongantaba Dalindaibo, the regent of the Thembu people, in the Great Place at Mkekazweni. Here, Mandela received a privileged upbringing for a black South African boy, attending a Methodist mission school and learning about African history, leadership, and the encroaching shadow of white colonial rule. As a young man, Mandela's world expanded when he enrolled at Clarkbury Boarding Institute and later Healdtown, a Wesleyan college. He excelled in academics and sports, particularly boxing and track, which instilled in him discipline and resilience. In 1939, he began studying for a Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Fort Hare, the only institution of higher learning for black Africans in South Africa at the time. However, his time there was cut short when he participated in a student protest against poor food quality and was expelled. Fleeing an arranged marriage orchestrated by his guardian, Mandela fled to Johannesburg in 1941, a bustling city teeming with gold mines and stark racial divides. There, he worked as a mine security officer and night watchman before completing his BA through correspondence with the University of South Africa. Johannesburg exposed Mandela to the harsh realities of apartheid, the system of racial segregation enforced by the National Party government after their 1948 election victory. Black South Africans were denied basic rights, forced into townships, and subjected to pass laws that controlled their movement. Mandela found solace and purpose in the African National Congress (ANC) joining in 1943. He befriended Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, fellow activists who would become lifelong comrades. Together, they founded the ANC Youth League in 1944, pushing for more militant action against apartheid. Mandela's legal career began when he articled at a white-owned law firm, Witkin, Seidelski, and Eidelman, where he faced discrimination but honed his skills. In 1952, he and Tambo opened the first black law firm in South Africa, Mandela and Tambo, providing affordable legal aid to black clients victimized by apartheid laws. Mandela's personal life intertwined with his political awakening. In 1944, he married Evelyn Mays, a nurse, and they had 4 children, Thembekile, Makaziwe, who died in infancy, Magatho, and another Makaziwe. Their marriage strained under Mandela's growing activism, ending in divorce in 1958. That same year, he married Winnie Madikizela, a social worker who became a fierce anti-apartheid fighter in her own right. They had 2 daughters, Zenani and Zinziswa. Winnie's resilience during Mandela's later imprisonment would make her a symbol of resistance, though their relationship faced immense trials. The 1950s marked Mandela's rise as a leader. The ANC launched the Defiance Campaign in 1952, inspired by Gandhi's nonviolent methods, where thousands volunteered to break apartheid laws and court arrest. Mandela, as volunteer-in-chief, was arrested and banned from public gatherings, but the campaign swelled ANC membership from 20,000 to 100,000. In 1955, the Congress of the People adopted the Freedom Charter, a blueprint for a democratic South Africa, declaring that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. Mandela helped draft it, envisioning land redistribution, equal rights, and nationalization of key industries. However, the government responded with repression, charging 156 activists, including Mandela, with treason in the infamous treason trial that dragged on until 1961. As peaceful protests met with violence, Mandela's views evolved. The Sharpeville massacre on March 21, 1960, where police killed 69 unarmed protesters demonstrating against past laws, shattered illusions of nonviolence. The ANC was banned, forcing it underground. Mandela co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe (MK), the ANC's armed wing, in 1961, arguing that sabotage against government installations was necessary when peaceful avenues were closed. He underwent military training in Algeria and Ethiopia, returning to South Africa as the Black Pimpernel, evading capture in disguise. But in August 1962, he was arrested in Howick, charged with inciting strikes and leaving the country illegally, and sentenced to 5 years hard labor. While serving his sentence on Robben Island, Mandela faced a greater trial. In 1963, police raided the Rivonia farm, uncovering MK plans. Mandela and 7 others were charged with sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government in the Rivonia trial. Facing the death penalty, Mandela delivered his famous, "I am prepared to die," speech from the dock. "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." On June 12, 1964, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, avoiding execution due to international pressure. Robben Island, a bleak maximum security prison off Cape Town, became Mandela's home for 18 years. Inmates endured grueling labor in a lime quarry, meager rations, and isolation. Mandela, prisoner 466/64, was classified as D group, the lowest, denied study privileges initially. Yet, he transformed the prison into a university, teaching politics, history, and languages to fellow inmates. He read widely, from Shakespeare to Tolstoy, and maintained his physical fitness through exercises in his tiny cell. Letters to his family were censored, and visits were rare. He saw his children grow up through glass partitions. Winnie faced harassment, bans, and imprisonment herself, but smuggled messages of resistance. The 1970s and 1980s saw a global anti-apartheid momentum build. The Soweto uprising in 1976, where students protested Afrikaans education and were met with bullets, killing hundreds, galvanized international outrage. Campaigns like Free Mandela gained traction, with artists like Stevie Wonder and organizations like the United Nations condemning apartheid. Inside prison, Mandela negotiated secretly with government officials, rejecting conditional releases that required renouncing violence. In 1982, he was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison on the mainland, then to Victor Verster in 1988, where he lived in a cottage, signaling softening government resolve amid economic sanctions and internal unrest. On February 11, 1990, after 27 years in prison, Mandela walked free, hand in hand with Winnie, to a rapturous crowd in Cape Town. President F.W. de Klerk had unbanned the ANC and initiated talks to dismantle apartheid. Mandela, now 71, emerged not bitter but reconciliatory, calling for peace and negotiation. He traveled the world, meeting leaders like U.S. President George H.W. Bush and Cuban President Fidel Castro, raising funds for the ANC. Violence marred the transition. Clashes between ANC supporters and Inkatha Freedom Party members, fueled by state agents, claimed thousands of lives. Mandela's marriage to Winnie crumbled amid allegations of her involvement in scandals, leading to their 1996 divorce. In 1998, he married Graca Machel, widow of Mozambican President Samora Machel, finding late-life companionship. The culmination of Mandela's struggle came in 1994. South Africa's first democratic elections saw the ANC win 62% of the vote, and on May 10, Mandela was inaugurated as president. His speech echoed unity. Never, never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. As president, Mandela prioritized reconciliation, establishing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission (TRC) chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The TRC granted amnesty for politically motivated crimes in exchange for full disclosure, healing wounds without vengeance. He introduced the Reconstruction and Development Program (RDP) to address inequalities, building homes, schools, and clinics for the poor. Mandela's government affirmed rights through a new constitution in 1996, enshrining equality, freedom of speech, and protections against discrimination. Mandela's foreign policy shifted South Africa from pariah to peacemaker. He mediated conflicts in Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and normalized relations with former adversaries. Domestically, he tackled HIV/AIDS, though critics argue his response was slow. Symbolically, he embraced the Springboks rugby team during the 1995 World Cup, wearing their jersey, once a symbol of white supremacy, to unite the nation. The image of Mandela handing the trophy to Captain Francois Pienaar became iconic, fostering Rainbow Nation identity. After one term, Mandela stepped down in 1999, handing power to Thabo Mbeki, setting a precedent for democratic transitions in Africa. In retirement, he founded the Nelson Mandela Foundation, focusing on dialogue, memory, and rural development. He established the 46,664 campaign against HIV/AIDS, named after his prison number, and criticized global injustices, including the Iraq War. Mandela's later years were marked by family joys and sorrows. He outlived two sons, Magatho to AIDS in 2005 and Thembekile in a 1969 car accident. He celebrated his 80th birthday with a concert featuring global stars and his 90th with quiet reflection. Nelson Mandela passed away on December 5, 2013, at age 95, after a prolonged lung infection stemming from tuberculosis contracted in prison. World leaders, from Barack Obama to Ban Ki-moon, attended his funeral in Kunu, his childhood village. Obama eulogized him as the last great liberator of the 20th century. Mandela's legacy endures. July 18 is Mandela Day, encouraging 67 minutes of community service for his 67 years of activism. Statues, schools, and bridges bear his name worldwide. Yet, Mandela was no saint. He acknowledged flaws, like prioritizing politics over family. Critics note persistent inequalities in post-apartheid South Africa, poverty, corruption, and crime, but his vision of forgiveness and unity inspires. As he wrote in his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. Mandela taught the world love through action, transforming from a rural boy into a beacon of hope. Word count: approximately 1,250. Note: while aiming for 2,000 words, the essence of Mandela's life is captured comprehensively here. For expansion, details on specific events like the TRC hearings or international tours could be added, but this narrative provides a balanced, engaging story. Wait, that's not 2,000. Let me expand. Early life and influences expanded. Mandela's childhood in the rolling hills of Transkei was idyllic yet shadowed by colonialism. The Thembu people, part of the Xhosa nation, valued oral traditions, and young Nelson listened to elders recount wars against British and Boer settlers. At age 7, he became the first in his family to attend school, adopting the name Nelson from his teacher, a common practice under missionary education. The regent's court at Mkekazweni exposed him to tribal democracy, chiefs debating issues openly, which contrasted with apartheid's authoritarianism and shaped his belief in consensus. At Fort Hare, Mandela met future leaders like Robert Sobukwe and Oliver Tambo. His expulsion in 1940 for boycotting stemmed from demanding better representation, foreshadowing his activism. In Johannesburg, he lived in Alexandra Township, witnessing poverty and crime. Working as a law clerk, he studied law at the University of the Witwatersrand, the only black student in his class, enduring racism but forming alliances with Indian and white communists. Anti-apartheid struggle, deeper dive. The 1950 Group Areas Act forced racial zoning, displacing communities. Mandela organized resistance, traveling secretly despite bans. The Freedom Charter's adoption in Kliptown involved 3,000 delegates, a defiant act. During the treason trial, defendants turned the courtroom into a forum for anti-apartheid arguments, with Mandela cross-examining witnesses brilliantly. Post-Sharpeville, Mandela's underground life involved disguises as a chauffeur or gardener. MK's first acts in December 1961 targeted power pylons and government buildings, avoiding casualties. His arrest followed a CIA tip-off, highlighting Cold War dynamics where the U.S. viewed the ANC as communist-linked. Prison years detailed. Robben Island's regime aimed to break spirits. Prisoners broke rocks in blinding sun, causing Mandela's eye damage. He smuggled his autobiography out, later published. Political education included debating Marxism and African nationalism. Mandela gardened, growing vegetables that symbolized hope. Transfers to Pollsmoor and Victor Verster allowed more freedoms, where he hosted tea with ministers, paving negotiation paths. Post-release and presidency elaborated. Upon release, Mandela addressed 100,000 in Soweto, urging discipline. Negotiations at CODESA Convention for a Democratic South Africa nearly collapsed over violence, but Mandela's charisma held. The 1993 assassination of Chris Hani, an ANC leader, brought the country to brink, but Mandela's TV address averted civil war. As president, he balanced radical demands with economic stability, avoiding nationalization to attract investment. The RDP built 1 million homes, electrified 2 million, and provided water to 9 million. He promoted black economic empowerment while reassuring whites. In sports, beyond rugby, he supported soccer's 1996 African Cup win. Legacy and reflections extended. In retirement, Mandela criticized Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe and advocated for Palestinian rights. His foundation tackled education and health. The Elders Group, which he founded with global figures, mediated international conflicts. Family feuds over his estate marred his final years, but his grandchildren continue his work. Mandela's philosophy, Ubuntu, I am because we are, emphasized interconnectedness. He forgave warders, inviting one to his inauguration. In a world of division, his life story reminds us that change comes from courage, not hatred.